Do you know how much of our communication is non-verbal? 93%, which is pretty concerning when you're doing a pitch, right? But it makes perfect sense when I think about the first time I met Dylan. The way he held himself, the wall he hid behind, the way he seemed to glue himself to the corner of the room, it all spoke with absolute clarity. And I didn't need to hear any words to know that Dylan hadn't always been told his life was a good and beautiful thing. Over time, I learnt bits and pieces of Dylan's story. I learnt of a girlfriend who had taken her life. I learnt of his daily usage of drugs and alcohol to cope. I learnt of the lines, the cuts on the inside of his forearms the first time I saw him without his leather jacket on. And I remember hearing his own words. No one ever believed in me. No one ever cared. Musicians Making a Difference, MMAD, we work with 16,000 young people every year. But every story has its own weight. And I remember feeling the weight of Dylan's story the first time he shared with me some of his lyrics. That crumpled up piece of paper held an enormous amount of grief and trauma. Every one of us in this room knows that we need people who believe in us. Why don't you think for a moment about someone who filled that role in your life? Now, many of us take this for granted because it's something we've always known to be normal. But it's not like that for everyone. For 25,000 homeless Australians between the ages of 12 and 24. For the 1 in 4 young people in my neighbourhood and yours who will experience a common mental health illness. For 16-year-old Dylan, when we first met him, it can be hard to feel like anyone believes in you. This is what MMAD exists to provide for every young person, someone who believes in them. How do we do it? You might be thinking. We use music, dance, poetry, and mentoring to help empower young lives, to be great creatively, but more than that, to build great character and to break free from whatever negative cycles have gotten in their way. See, I remember the first time I saw Dylan standing in our recording studio, showing us the voice that we had always known was in there. We told Dylan that we believed that, and he came to believe it too. But it's much more than music. We recently celebrated with Dylan 1 year without any drugs, alcohol, or self-harm. Yeah. But it's even better than that. Today, Dylan is absolutely committed to showing his belief in other young people. And he now records the stories and songs of other young people in the same studio where he reclaimed his voice. This is a young person who has experienced a place of family and belonging and is now absolutely committed to showing other young people the same. I want to ask you tonight to show your belief in young people like Dylan. $15,000 would mean 20 young people participate in Sound Foundations, where we met Dylan. It's a course where we teach the foundations of writing, recording, and performing music and poetry. But more than that, it's where we help young people to lay a sound foundation for their future. It's a building block, a launching pad, and many of these young people will continue through the next steps of our creative mentoring model, and several of them will go on, like Dylan, to give back and join the movement of believing in other young people. Now, if we were to raise $30,000 tonight, that would multiply that impact into 40 young lives. The impact of 40 believed-in young people is enormous. That's 40 families, 40 neighbourhoods, 40 future trajectories of those lives and all the lives connected to them. And if, through the generosity in the room tonight, we were able to raise $40,000, we would be able to film those stories, and release an album recorded in our professional studio to reach thousands of other young people online. When you give to MMAD, you are joining a movement of us committed to ensuring that every young person has someone who believes in them. Tonight, I've shared with you the story of Dylan finding his voice. And Dylan is in the room tonight to share that voice with you.
Well, you're only going to make it if you're going to get mad. So grab something useful like a pen and a pad. Write down how you're feeling. Here, I'll start it off. I feel light, I feel tremendous, I feel great. Maybe that's just because I've kicked past month number 8. That's right, I'm talking about over 8 months clean. So you wasn't forced on through dictatorship. I finally had the courage to give up a seat leadership. I got rid of those holding me down. Yes, I'm talking about those dimwits that kept dragging me back down below my limits, kept tripping me over every time I got closer to the finish. And now we've crossed the line, and now we're voice for the voiceless. Man, it feels great, like I'm giving a choice to the choiceless. Because when you fight for your rights. Never give up until you run and take flight. Because this life will give you good and the bad, but you're only going to make it if you're going to get mad.
Thank you. So we want to invite you to join our MMAD movement and ensure that every young person has someone who believes in them and the opportunity to live their full potential. Thank you.